Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental, especially now, acculturation.
Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. You know, when different cultures meet, how do groups actually change? What's that whole process like? That's what we want to explore with you today.
And we've got some really interesting sources to help us do that, shared by you, our listener. We're looking at studies on migrants, refugees, how they adapt.
And also how things like parenting styles connect to identity.
Exactly. And different takes on what acculturation even is from, psychology, sociology,
Yeah.
plus Erikson's ideas on identity, Marcia's identity statuses.
Right, and how that all links up to, well, our well-being. It's quite a mix.
It is. So the plan is to sort of distill all that, pull out the key stuff.
Yeah, give you a clear picture of acculturation and how it plays into identity without hopefully getting lost in jargon. We want those aha moments.
Definitely, those connections that just click.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What exactly is acculturation? Where do we start?
Well, at its core, acculturation is about the changes, social, psychological, cultural naturation that happen when, two different cultural groups have direct, ongoing contact.
Okay, direct contact.
And a really key point from the sources is it's not just one way. It actually affects both groups involved.
Ah, right. That's important. So it's not just like one group becoming like the other.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
It can lead to what one source calls a cultural mosaic. Think of it like people can keep parts of their original culture and adopt bits of the new one.
A mosaic. I like that. So bits of both existing together.
Precisely. It's not always an either situation.
Mm.
And, while we're focused on acculturation, sometimes you'll hear other terms too, right? Like incorporation or assimilation.
Yeah, I've heard those.
Yeah.
Especially assimilation. How is acculturation different? They can sound kind of similar sometimes.
They can, yeah. Sociologists, anthropologists sometimes use those terms maybe more focused on how a group fits into the bigger society, like civic involvement, that kind of thing. But a really useful analogy to tell acculturation from assimilation is the whole salad bowl versus melting pot
Oh,
idea.
yeah, I know that one. Melting pot is like everything blends into one thing.
Exactly. Assimilation, the melting pot, suggests cultures blend together, often meaning minority cultures kind of lose their distinctiveness, become more like the dominant one.
Right.
But acculturation, that's more like the salad bowl. You have all these different ingredients, different cultures in the same bowl, but they each keep their own unique flavor, their identity, while still being part of the whole salad.
Okay, that makes it much clearer. Salad bowl, you can still be distinct. Melting pot, everything kind of mushes together.
Pretty much. Acculturation allows you to keep your original culture while still interacting with others.
So it's about finding a balance then, not necessarily replacing one thing with another.
That's a good way to put it, a balancing act.
And are there like different ways people actually manage that balance?
Oh, absolutely. The sources talk about something called bidimensional models.
Bidimensional sounds technical.
It just means instead of thinking about it like a straight line, moving from culture A to culture B, these models suggest we manage two things separately.
Okay, like what?
Like how connected you feel to your original heritage culture and how much you engage with the new host culture. They're seen as two different dimensions, you see.
Ah, okay. So you could be high on both or low on one, high on the other.
Exactly. It's more nuanced than just a simple scale from old to new.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. It feels more like real life.
It does. And, researchers like Barry have even mapped out different strategies based on this. Like integration is keeping both, assimilation is focusing on the new, separation is sticking with the old.
And what was the fourth? Marginalization.
Right. That's feeling disconnected from both, which can be really tough. But another related idea that sources bring up is enculturation.
Enculturation, what's that? Is it the opposite?
Not exactly the opposite, but it's focused inward. Enculturation is the process of learning or sometimes reaffirming your own culture of origin.
Your own culture. So, like, learning traditions you didn't grow up with.
Yeah, or deepening your connection. And what's interesting is this can be super relevant even for, say, third or fourth generations who might feel a pull to connect with their roots.
So it's not just for recent immigrants.
Not at all. One study actually found that for some Irish and Italian Americans, that sense of ethnicity and belonging was maybe even stronger in the third generation than the first. Like that desire to connect grows over time.
Wow, that's fascinating. So cultural identity isn't just something you get and then it stays fixed.
Definitely not. It evolves, which leads nicely into another key point from the sources. how acculturation looks different across generations.
Right. That seems pretty intuitive. Later generations probably feel more integrated.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Second and third generations often show, greater acculturation to the host culture. Part of it is just time, longer residence, more exposure to things like schools, media, the main institutions.
Makes sense. Didn't one source have that little story, the Jesse, not Josephina one?
Exactly. That illustrates it perfectly.
Hmm.
Josefina, second-generation Latina in Chicago, prefers Jesse, finds some of her parents' Puerto Rican ways a bit, well, old-fashioned.
But she still likes the food and music, right?
Oh, yeah. She still enjoys parts of her heritage. It's that blend again, but maybe leaning more towards the culture she grew up in. It shows that shift.
Yeah, that feels very real. And there was another example, too, wasn't there, about Albanian students?
Uh-huh. They were born in the new country, grew up together, and they didn't necessarily connect with, say, traditional family recipes in the same way their parents might have. Their shared experience was different.
They formed their own kind of cultural reality there. Okay, but this whole process, adapting, balancing, it can't always be smooth sailing, can it?
No, definitely not. And that's where the concept of acculturative stress comes in. It's basically the psychological difficulties, the strain people feel when trying to adapt to a new culture.
Stress. Okay, what kind of things cause that stress? What does it actually look like?
It can be a whole range of things. Practical stuff, like obviously learning a new language, that's huge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But also navigating totally different social rules.
Yeah.
How close to stand, eye contact, what's polite, what's not. It can be really anxiety-provoking.
Constantly second-guessing yourself.
Exactly. Then there's dealing with bureaucracies, maybe meeting new job skills, understanding different values around family or work or time. It all adds up.
It sounds exhausting, frankly, like you're always on trying to figure things out.
It can be.
Uh,
And the sources also point out that the reason someone migrated makes a big difference.
how so?
Well, think about it. If you moved voluntarily, maybe for a job or education, you likely had some preparation, some choice.
Yeah.
If you were forced to flee as a refugee, you're dealing with trauma, loss, lack of control, on top of the cultural adjustment.
Right, so voluntary migrants generally experience less acculturative stress.
Generally, yes. Though everyone's experience is unique, of course. Other factors matter too.
Like what?
Things like having strong family support helps buffer the stress.
Yeah.
Poor language skills, obviously, make it harder. And interestingly, how long you've been there matters, but not always how you'd expect. Sometimes, seeing more established members of your community who are fluent and successful can actually increase stress for newcomers who are still struggling. Comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a difficult kind of sense. It's such a complex web. Okay, so let's connect this now. We've got acculturation, we've got the stress. How does all this tie into identity? Into figuring out who am I?
That's a really crucial link, especially during adolescence and young adulthood. Erikson talked about this stage, right? Identity versus role confusion.
Yeah, the time when you're trying out different things, figuring out your values, your place in the world.
Exactly.
Sure.
Now imagine doing that while also navigating between two different cultures. It adds a whole other layer of complexity.
So it's not just what do I believe, but maybe which set of beliefs feels right? My family's, this new culture's, some mix.
Precisely. You're juggling typical identity questions and cultural identity questions simultaneously. Where do I fit? Which norms resonate? How do I integrate these different parts of me?
And Marcia's identity statuses fit in here. The different ways people land on an identity.
They do. Remember, diffusion, foreclosure, moratorium, achievement, those different paths of exploring and committing. Well, acculturation experiences can definitely influence which path someone takes.
Okay, tell me more about foreclosure in this context. That sounds like deciding too soon.
Kind of. Identity foreclosure is when someone could be, but they skip that vital exploration phase. They commit before they've really searched.
And that might mean the identity doesn't quite fit later on.
Potentially, yeah. It might not be as deeply rooted or as resilient. Then there's also the idea of moral identity that came up.
Moral identity. So like our sense of right and wrong.
Exactly. That part of our identity that's tied to our core values, our ethics, what gives us purpose. Acculturation can shape this too.
How? By being exposed to different ideas of what's right or wrong.
Yes, encountering different cultural norms, ethical perspectives,
Yes.
societal expectations. It can make you re-examine your own moral compass, maybe refine it, maybe expand it. It influences what you see as important, what gives life meaning.
So it can actually deepen your sense of purpose, potentially.
It could, yeah. or challenge it. It's part of that whole identity formation process. And speaking of influences, parenting styles came up too.
Right. How does parenting fit into acculturation and identity?
Well, one study found a link between what's called authoritative parenting. Warm, supportive, but with clear roles and good communication.
Kind of the balanced approach.
Yeah. That style was linked to kids having an informative identity style, meaning they actively look for information to figure out who they are.
Okay, makes sense.
But permissive parenting, more hands-off, was linked to a diffuse avoidance style, basically. Not exploring, not committing.
So how does culture fit in? Parenting styles aren't the same everywhere, right?
Exactly. Cultural norms about parenting very hugely. So imagine a family moves and the parenting style that was normal in their home culture is seen differently. Or maybe the kids are exposed to different styles through school and friends.
Ah, so that could create tension within the family or influence how the kids approach their own identity search as they acculturate.
Precisely. It's another layer in that complex ecosystem we talked about.
Okay, so it's all interconnected. Acculturation, identity, stress, family. What about the outcome, the impact on just feeling okay, on well-being?
There's definitely a connection there. The sources suggest that reaching that state of identity achievement, having explored and committed to a sense of self, is generally linked to better psychological well-being.
Feeling like you know who you are is good for you. Seems logical.
It does. And conversely, that acculturative stress we talked about, that can really take a toll on well-being, especially when you're trying to form your identity, feeling like you don't belong, constantly struggling. That can impact mental health.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Feeling lost or stressed would definitely affect your overall happiness. Is it all just about stress and difficulty, though? Or can navigating this process actually lead to positive outcomes for well-being?
Absolutely. It's not all negative. One idea mentioned is eudaimonic well-being.
Eudaimonic. Fancy word.
Oh, yeah. It basically means finding happiness and fulfillment through living in line with your values, reaching your potential, having a sense of purpose.
Okay, like a deeper kind of well-being than just feeling good.
Kind of, yeah. And navigating acculturation, wrestling with those identity questions, can actually help you develop a really unique bicultural or multicultural identity.
How does that help well-being?
Well, being able to draw from multiple cultures, feeling comfortable in different settings, it can broaden your perspective, maybe boost creativity, make you more flexible. It can lead to a richer, more complex sense of self that really contributes to that eudaimonic well-being, that sense of purpose.
So the struggle itself can lead to strength and a richer identity, potentially.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
Having access to more than one cultural toolkit, so to speak, can be a real asset.
Okay. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. If we were to boil it down, what are the main takeaways you'd want someone listening to hold on to?
Okay, 3 things maybe. First, acculturation isn't simple. It's complex, it changes over generations, it affects everyone involved, and it's really dynamic.
Right, not just one thing.
Second, it's deeply, deeply tied to identity development, especially for young people. It adds extra layers to that whole who am I question.
Makes the search more complicated, but maybe richer too.
Exactly. And third, well, yes, there's definitely stress involved. Acculturative stress is real. The process isn't only about challenges. It can also foster unique strengths, leading to bicultural identities that can actually enhance well-being in the long run.
Stress and strength, complexity and identity. Got it. That's a great summary. So here's something to chew on then. As our world gets more and more mixed, culturally speaking,
Which it is.
how does our whole understanding of identity or even well-being need to shift? How do we properly account for these bicultural, multicultural lives that are becoming, well, increasingly common? What does that mean for us as a society?
That's a huge question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely something that needs more thought. We've really only scratched the surface today.
For sure. There's so much more, like the specific ways people cope or the long-term effects on how people think.
Yeah, things like cognitive flexibility, creativity,
Yeah.
lots to explore.
So, for you listening, what parts of this really resonated? What questions are still lingering? We definitely encourage you to check out the sources, dig deeper if you're interested.
Keep exploring.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.